Hello, hello. We beat the buzzer.
I was gonna say, are you gonna make it back to your desk in time? I was watching the clock and I'm watching you.
At the 10-second mark of the countdown, I realized I don't have my water bottle. So a mad dash commenced. But we made it. You made it. You're here for GPS Live for August 2nd, 2024. Thank you so much for joining us for another week of cybersecurity news coverage. Jonathan, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. It is quite an exciting week of stories for everybody tuning in live or in the future. Outside of that,
Yeah.
it's in the sales world. Somebody may relate, but we just have big end of month for many people, end of quarter, and in general, we're also getting into cybersecurity season with Black Hat and DEF CON coming up next week. And for those that are traveling out to Vegas, please be sure to check out our GuidePoint Security event hub for Black Hat and DEF CON. We have a ton of really great parties for you to attend.
Yeah, we have some awesome stuff going on. And then shortly on the heels of that is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which is everyone's favorite non-holiday. But we'll have some more interesting content for that. Last year, we had a really fun kind of campaign that we did around that, just looking into the future for where we see current trends potentially leading if they were left unchecked. But like Jonathan said, thank you for joining us here right now, and thank you for joining us in the future, which is currently your present if you are watching this for the video on demand. We have some awesome stories to go over, but it is important to note that we are just two guys talking about cybersecurity news that we found, and the views and opinions that we express are not necessarily the exact views of GuidePoint Security. This is just the things that we think as we read these stories and we reflect on them. And it's also important to note that anything that we say in here is not also like official endorsement or chastising of companies for things. We are just covering the news as it occurs. That being said, we have some awesome stories this week that I think are going to be really interesting to folks. So if you do find them interesting, even if you don't find them interesting, I mean, less preferable, but regardless of how interesting you find the stories, drop a comment, let us know where you're commenting from and what your thoughts are on what we're talking about. We love getting you guys involved in the conversation. So let's kick it off. Jonathan, this you actually found most of the stories this week. Ben dropped a couple in there as well. I woke up this morning, and by the time I opened Slack to like drop some suggestions, there were already plenty in there. So let's go ahead and start covering. What is the first story that we've got today?
Well, the first story coming to us from the Hacker News is about Facebook ads that are taking victims, unsuspecting victims, to fake websites. And these fake websites are meant to look like the real thing. If you've been scrolling at all on any social media platforms lately, you've probably noticed ads for lots of very lucrative, expensive items for an extremely cheap price for some weird reason. Hey, get this pair of Ray-Bans for $20. Yeah, right. What the story is going into talks about how a lot of these e-commerce scams are being set up to look like the official brands with naming, pictures, all kinds of details. But sadly, they're taking their victims to a self-hosted website with the sole purpose of doing damage, stuff like stealing your information and potentially even putting malware on your devices.
Yeah, so this has actually been really common. My social media of choice is short form content, so of course I'm on TikTok a lot, but like this happens across all social media platforms now. The surge in scammers and attackers paying for ad space, utilizing really highly targeted ads as well. For things, right? And so the hallmarks of these, like you said, are ridiculously low prices for generally expensive goods, things that look like real deals, or taking advantage of things that are kind of like zeitgeist popularity. There was a series of them that I saw that was for a like Flipboard style display. That you could buy, and it was advertising it for like $200. And I looked at it and I was like, I'm pretty sure that's an art piece. That's like that's a
one-off.
Well, it's like an art piece that then got commercialized, but it's sold like by the Museum of Modern Art in New York or something like that, and it's like $5,000. So they're taking these things, that piece got really popular as a like luxury item. And so then they played off of that. A recent one that I actually just saw yesterday was for pedal powered kayaks for $50. I reported it as a scam, but within a couple hours, my friends were messaging me asking if I thought it was legit. Because the thing is, they're getting very thorough with it, right? So they're opening up new social accounts that have official sounding names. They're actually buying domain names that are associated with those accounts. And then building out full websites, customer testimonials, reviews, about us sections. And then they're just pulling the product pages from these other sources and putting it in. So these all look very official. So you have to look for very tiny details to be able to identify these things right away, aside from like the very low price. Looking for small grammar mistakes in sections of the site that are not fully copied and pasted over. Or in the case of the one that I found yesterday, the about section was actually for a completely different website. They had just pulled it in to theirs.
This definitely falls under that too good to be true kind of category. And just to put some kind of framework on this, earlier this year, some research pulled off that over 75,000 phony online stores were part of one campaign alone, known as the Bogus Bazaar. And the metrics behind it showed over $50 million of profits being made by these groups by selling what appeared to be shoes and apparel and things of fast fashion of very well-known brands, but sadly all of it being not just fake, but nothing ever really being delivered in it as well. And that's just part of it when it comes to the financial crime side of it. We actually have some more stuff coming as part of today's show to talk about the push in the malvertising aspect of targeting individuals and victims. So at first, they're not just going to try to steal your money through some of these purchasing campaigns. Remember, you're giving them your credit card number, getting nothing in return other than a big pain in the neck and potentially a lot of additional fraudulent charges.
Well, and there's, speaking of how this money is being stolen, right? There's a different type of scam that is cropping up. We don't have a story for this one. This is just things that I have seen a lot of talk about on social media. Is people are now getting packages. We've talked about this kind of thing before, right? Getting random packages that are being sent to you from Amazon, so that whoever is sending it to you can get verified purchases, so that they can leave their own reviews for their own products. But now people are starting to get packages for very fine, like luxury good items. A lot of examples that I've seen have been like jewelry, rings that have very nice settings and things like that. And then in that will be a postcard that'll say something like, for information about the stones in this piece of jewelry, or for like a message from a surprise message from the person who sent you this gift, scan this QR code. And then people are scanning that QR code, and it is loading malware on their phone that is then stealing their info, grabbing their bank account information, and clearing them out. And so several people have made posts about like, yep, this just, this literally just happens to me. I got this card. And then, or saying, like, hey, my mom literally just fell for this, and now we're trying to claw back all of her money. So these ads and these targeted scams and ads and stuff are starting to become more sophisticated, and like they're leveraging the tools that that social media presents to us, right? So social media gives you the power, because their real moneymaker is advertising, right? To define custom groups for who your ad will go to. So you can create a fake advertisement and target it just at people who are going to be very likely to click on wanting a great deal on Ray-Bans or a kayak. So these things are starting to just become more sophisticated.
Yeah, and talking about the sophistication, when we get into the other side of it, which is that malware push, like you're mentioning in the scanning of these QR codes and potential packages, or simply just, getting to these websites and not necessarily going after your credit cards at first, but just going after to get you to download or run things on your mobile devices. There is an up and coming Android rat that's starting to appear just as recently as May of earlier this year, known as Bingo Mod.
Yes.
And what was that?
I'm just agreeing. Yes, bingo mod.
Yes, yes. So Bingo Mod, but Bingo Mod has a number of really dangerous capabilities and features that it does indeed also focus from a financial perspective of being able to intercept, overlay, and convince you regarding banking transactions and financial data on your device. And so
Yep.
if they can't necessarily get you to buy something with your credit card, they can at least get you to backdoor your own Android phone, and they'll start their malicious activities from there.
Yeah, and bingo mod, what that's doing is it's utilizing accessibility services and permissions on the phone to be able to steal sensitive information. So credentials, SMS messages, account balances, bank account information. It's just using those accessibility services that are built into the phone to do good. Again, utilizing the things that are given to us and are supposed to be a good part of our day-to-day lives. Accessibility services obviously allows a lot of permission on your device because it is able to do things like screen read, take screenshots, and look through all of that information. And when you think about something like SMS messages, the number of services that still use SMS as their
Yeah.
two-factor authentication, something like this is incredibly dangerous.
Absolutely. And one of the more scary, at least in my opinion, capabilities of some of these tools, especially this Bingo Mod remote access Trojan, is the ability to absolutely wipe the devices. So, should these threat actors decide that you're of no more value to them, the capability to remotely destroy your phone exists, right? One of the other components is that kind of screen grab capability. So, it essentially has its own version of VNC built in so that there's not just a visible component to it, but also that remote connectivity so that you can click, tap, keyboard. So if your phone is sitting idle, somebody else could potentially be using it at that time. And so making sure that you're staying aware of these types of different scams that are happening online. Again, if it's too good to be true, be very careful what you're clicking and places that you're putting in your credentials and information to help avoid ending up as a victim of one of these tools.
Yeah, especially when you have employees who have work accounts tied to their personal devices and phones, right? Educating your workforce about this kind of thing becomes even more important. But we've got some other stories to dive through. This one was something that you brought in today, and this is a story on CBS News, is where I believe the source was, and I think we might have a archive link that we can drop for it as well. But this one was just posted a couple days ago. It's a fairly new story coming out of Florida. A blood donation facility has been hit with a ransomware attack that has rendered them unable to meet the regular demands for blood.
Yeah, if you, like myself, or a Florida resident, you've definitely seen the big red buses around town, often, helping collect blood for, hospitals and those that absolutely need it. And again, it's also a nonprofit. And sadly, they've been a victim of a cyber attack, particularly the company called One Blood. And this has just been a really challenging kind of series of events because this is also one of those kind of supply chain discussions where, again, the term supply chain doesn't necessarily have to mean a tangible good or a virtual thing or some kind of API connection to a third party provider. In this case, it's not necessarily hospital equipment, it's hospital goods that individuals absolutely need. And so this story kind of started to trickle out as people involved with the organization and involved with the blood collection were starting to recognize that there was some kind of issue with the systems. Since then, the company has come forward and they are really kind of struggling because they service over 350 hospitals down here in the Southeast region across Florida, Georgia, and stuff like that.
Yeah. So in the meantime, since the cyber attack occurred, the One Blood has been carrying out their normal operations and procedures basically through pen and paper. So to the extent that they are able to, which you have to laud the organization itself, right, for continuing to do the vital work that they're doing, and just basically slogging through the fact that it is now a mountain of paperwork that they have to do, but that still has significantly reduced the capability that they have to collect blood donations and to then distribute them out to hospitals. So that work taking so much longer, you also have to take into account, right? The actual like storage procedures and anything else that this could potentially impact for this. And the thing that's interesting about this was we just published the Great Ransomware Report last week that talked a lot about the changing kind of techniques and tactics of ransomware groups, new groups that are emerging, and in the kind of cratering, right, of Lockbit as the number one reigning supreme group within ransomware. These other groups are starting to come up and attracting affiliates to their program. And what makes this an interesting story is that a lot of large ransomware groups for a long time did operate under rules for their affiliates that forbade them from going after critical services and hospitals and places that, anything that could kind of actually fundamentally impact human life. And that was something that you'd see crop up from time to time. As an affiliate for one of these larger groups would go after a hospital, and then the group would say, okay, we don't own them anymore. Like, they went rogue. That's not on us. In the end, it ultimately is on them. They are criminals, right? And they are they are performing illegal activities to try and extort these ransoms. But it will be interesting to see who claims this particular attack. If it is ever claimed, and whether that will be a large group or a smaller group, if it's an affiliate of a larger group, and to identify, because the erosion of these kind of rules of the game for ransomware, right, over time, as we've gone from single extortion to double to triple extortion, finding out that, hey, data that was promised to be deleted or removed from distribution never was. These things are kind of eroding as the war effort against ransomware continues to ramp up.
Now, some of the technical details have been making their way over to Bleeping Computer, where there's a second article talking about how VMware was part of the I guess we'll say target system. So a particular ransomware game that has not been named encrypted the organization's VMware hypervisor infrastructure. Now, we've talked about more recently, just so as last week, right, that there are more ransomware games starting to recognize that hypervisor. I think it was Play was the one we talked about that has pivoted to ESX being a target. And this looks like that may be the case. And again, the information isn't fully out there yet. This is only based on what is being communicated through some potential channels with these media groups. But either way, it's we've talked a lot about healthcare on this show, and this is just kind of an extension of that. It also just goes to show that really anybody can become a victim of this type of ransomware these days. And regardless of the industry that you're in, you do have to stay vigilant. You do have to make sure that you're keeping things updated, staying secure. Even with vulnerabilities coming out regarding upgrading potential group names to get privilege escalation. There's a lot of things going on, and you got to stay ahead of the curve.
Yes, you do. And, we do need to move on a little bit from stories to keep things chugging along here. But speaking of ransomware and ransoms and payment, that is often conducted through cryptocurrency. Well, pretty much always conducted through cryptocurrency.
That's my favorite. I love crypto. All right.
Yeah, we love it. So that brings us to our next story, which is that the Gemini cryptocurrency exchange is disclosing a data breach that it includes their customers' bank account information. Now, this one is again going back to our constant hammering on things like supply chain, right? This was not actually a breach directly of Gemini's cryptocurrency exchange platform, but instead, this was a breach of the automated clearinghouse that they use for ACH transfers to their customers. Excuse me, something is stuck in my throat.
Well, while you're getting that figured out here, yes, because it is a third-party connection, it does abstract a lot of the Gemini main platform information away from this. So in this particular case, Gemini is coming forward and saying that our ACH service provider, although not necessarily named as part of this, has suffered a breach, and things included in that are full name, bank account number, and routing number, which some may say isn't necessarily over the top sensitive, but then again, with that basic information, you can perform a transaction. You just got to be pretty brazen to try to pull off that kind of finance fraud. But regardless, this is a really great example of a company who takes this cybersecurity very seriously, and even anything that happens with a third-party organization deeply tied into the success and the financial transactions of their company, they get involved and they speak up and they talk about what's going on.
Yeah, and so this is a good example, right, of the positive communication that we want to see from companies. Right, they sent samples of letters to the Attorney General's office in California. They have been emailing their customers, letting them know about this. And as you and I were talking about before the show started, right, with bank account number, routing number, and full name, right, you can definitely create and try to pull a transaction from that, but because of the limitations on ACH and legal requirements, right, there is like a waiting period, so it does have to go for a while without getting caught for that to actually go through. But it is still concerning that this information was able to be obtained. But again, this, in the end, while Gemini's customers were the ones who were impacted by this, it was a third party. And so Gemini stepping up to take the proactive step to say, oh, hey, this third party we use, the information that our customers gave us that was then handed to them has been breached. It's on us to communicate that. We like that positive step in the right direction towards these things.
Absolutely. And that also helps kind of lead into other good successful stories that we found and pulled for this week, just to keep things on schedule here. But this next story coming to us from Bleeping Computer talks about something that I think is super cool, but more particularly French police pulling the plug on PlugX malware.
PlugX. I'm now looking and seeing that I accidentally typoed that in our called it PushX. There we go.
But pulling the plug on PlugX by activating one of its built-in self-destruction features. Now, this is actually super cool. We've seen different governments and nation-state organizations take the initiative to research some of the malware that's proliferating around their country and other countries. Yeah. And they're finding that there are kill switches built in. And now once they can get a hold of the command and control network, they can activate that kill switch. And that sounds a little bit about like what's going on here, right?
Exactly. That is, in fact, you've summed up the story beautifully, Jonathan. So the what's happening is the cybersecurity firm Sequoia reported on the PlugX botnet that they were tracking, or a variant of the PlugX botnet that was spreading through USB flash drives. And that botnet was abandoned by its creators, but continued to spread independently. And it ended up coming out to 2.5 million devices that were infected with this particular PlugX variant. So they took control of that abandoned botnet. They sinkholed all of the connections to it, right, so that it couldn't be used to issue commands. But because it was still out there, it did risk another threat actor coming in and stepping in to take advantage of all of those infected devices by taking over those PlugX installations. And so they proposed a way to get rid of this, which is to push a plugin for PlugX to all of those infected devices that would tell it to uninstall itself. Mm-hmm. And so the French government, in conjunction with Sequoia, opted to take that step, and they have now pushed out that fix to clean those devices. An interesting note about it is that they have also made it available to other nations and governments, but left the decision to actually do that to those governments, because there is a risk with this, which is that pushing out this plugin, or pushing out this command to these PlugX infections could potentially corrupt data on those drives.
Now, one of the interesting things here about this story, and this kind of goes to that age-old adage of in cybersecurity, is don't pick up thumb drives, don't pick up USB sticks, whether they're outside an organization, on the street, left behind in a restroom,
handed to you at a booth at Black Hat.
Yeah. Black Hat and DEF CON next week.
Yeah.
Plug in all these people. So, just like we saw years and years ago with other nation state attacks like Stuxnet, the USB drives are being used to help target air-gapped systems. And in this case, that was the primary goal of a lot of this. Being able as an organization or a government to swoop in, take over an IP address or a host name to regain control of that command and control aspect of it, and then be able to then remove all of these is very cool. But just keep in mind the low level of effort that was going into it allowing to be spread. USB sticks are still a potential danger, and when you're going through some of these conferences and thumb drives are the gift at the booth, I'm still very hesitant, and some may say, well, then just plug it into your Linux box that's air gapped, or plug it into your Mac. Macs don't get viruses. Excuse me, but these are still dangerous weaponized devices, especially stuff like bad USB. Just be very hesitant, be very careful.
Be very hesitant and careful. We had another story that we wanted to talk about, but I want to jump backwards really quickly to the Florida blood bank. Because actually I pinged Grit right before the show started to ask them about their opinions, and we have a statement back. So I think, I could just read that here. So far in 2024, we've observed an increase in high-profile ransomware attacks targeting victims in the healthcare sector. While the number and share of victims in the healthcare sector account has only increased marginally, the attack outcomes are seemingly more impactful. In previous years, many ransomware as a service groups included explicit language in their affiliate rules prohibiting the targeting of healthcare organizations, or at least forbidding encryption which could impact medical operations. These former taboos appear to have eroded in 2024 following substantial law enforcement disruption operations against the most prolific ransomware as a service groups and a substantial attack against Change Healthcare in early 2024. Healthcare is consistently one of the most impacted industries month over month, and publicly available reporting indicates that impactful ransomware attacks resulting in encryption and associated outages are becoming more frequent. Healthcare poses an attractive target for ransomware groups due to the impacts of encryption and operational downtime, as well as the public attention that is garnered in the wake of a successful ransomware attack. Ransomware groups likely consider press covering the attacks as a powerful motivator for future victims, and have communicated the impacts of such attacks to recent victims as a show of force. As a result of these high-profile attacks, healthcare organizations may be more inclined to pay a ransom to avoid threats to life and safety and avoid prolonged negative publicity. So that's the analysis coming directly from Grit regarding the Florida Blood Donation Center, One Blood, and the attack that is going against them, right? So just like we were saying, this erosion of the norms of avoiding attacking critical healthcare infrastructure, and pulling off these kind of flashy attacks that the media can pick up so that you can utilize those as further extortion against other victims. So it would not surprise me to see this picked up by the ransomware group that is responsible for it, claiming responsibility and being very vocal about it, so that if they hit someone else, they can say, hey, that was us. Do you really want that to happen to you? So that's our statement from Grit. Let's cover our last story really quickly, because this is the one that actually got us our titles for today. This is a fun one. An unnamed Ferrari executive, unnamed in the report that we read at least, has foiled a phishing attempt, apparently. So the way this story goes is that on a Tuesday morning, an executive at Ferrari started receiving a bunch of WhatsApp messages alleging to be from the CEO of Ferrari, Benedetto Vigna. And the messages were, did you see the acquisition we're planning? We need your help on this. All the paperwork's already done. We've already informed the stock exchanges. We need you to sign this NDA that we're going to send over real quick. And apparently what happened next is they actually started utilizing AI and deep fakes to just hold a phone conversation with this executive posing as the CEO of Ferrari. And apparently the voice was very convincing.
Yeah, although it was apparently spot on to the Italian accent, everything across the board, sadly, this executive started to detect something wasn't up. There was a little bit of a robotic aspect to the voice at times. And furthermore, it just didn't sound right because this executive had just had a personal conversation with this individual. So much so that what throttled the entire thing was a simple question. Hey, what was the name of that book that you recommended for me? Something so personal, something so deep that Only the CEO would know the answer to this. And that's exactly what put a stop to the whole thing.
According to the story, yeah, according to the story, as soon as that question was posed, the communication was abruptly terminated. And so, you know, going back to Jonathan and I's new catchphrase for the show, multi-factor all of the things, something you know, something you have, something you are. In this case, because this executive thought fast enough to ask for something they knew, only something that they would know, they were able to stop this attempt and cut it off. And so that was immediately turned over to Ferrari's internal investigations team. And they started looking into that. And I'm sure we will see more stories like this as time goes on, as this only becomes easier and simpler to accomplish. But that brings us right to the top of our show. So thank you so much for joining us for the week of August 2nd, 2024 for GPS Live. We've really appreciated having you here. Thank you so much, Kevin and Tyler, for joining the conversation in the comments. You guys had some insightful things to say in there. David Tan, thank you so much for joining as well. We love having you guys here, and we look forward to talking to you again next week. Until then, I have been and will continue to be Tristan Morris.
And I am Jonathan Singer.
And as always, multi-factor all the things, and we will catch you next time.